I had to make sure I definitely changed the sound this time, and I moved the lighting. Compliments of my wife.
Yeah.
All right, let me not be so snarky today. But yeah, man. Anyway, while we kind of warm up, and I know you'll start hopping through, you can check it. Let me know when you can see you're good on that end. I definitely no. I will get up early. Let me not even try to fool myself. I was gonna say like maybe I'll leave in tomorrow, but that's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, there's no way. Let me
no, there's no,
fix this audio
there's
real
zero
quick.
way. There's zero way. Oh, what's up, Nelson? I see you.
There
I'll
we
go ahead and
go.
do a quick little slap. That's Nelson right there, Mr. Punch Slap himself. By the way, Nelson, I thought of you today. Every time I see a treadmill, I think of you. I won't say why, but you and I know the real reasons behind it.
I don't know if that's a good thing for Nelson or bad, but
No, look. Treadmills, they can be deadly, but we both have lived to tell the tale. Nonetheless, though. All right, so today, two main topics. Yeah, Nelson, two main topics today. Definitely is going to be that Face app, and for sure, oh, Trump's tweet. Oh my God. So we're going to come to that. Obviously, we're going to save.
it's you know what, Terrence? Let me just stop you. It's not even Trump's tweet. This is a topic that has come up so many times. In our last few episodes, we've kind of been referencing this idea that it's okay to tell people to go back to where they came from. And I just think we need to embrace all of it and put it all into one big discussion and say, let's figure this out. Is this okay? Is this not okay? Because I think that's important to distinct here.
Oh man, no, I'm with you 100% on that. And so just go ahead and jump right in for the sake of time, so we don't go too crazy and go overboard here. All right, so the Face app. Oh, so my first encounter with this. By the way, this company is not. Yeah, the Russians did develop it. That's what Nelson just said. So I'm posting up here. Yes, they did. And by the way, they've been around since. I know they were popular in 2017 for sure. Anything else prior than that, I couldn't say for sure. But I find this so interesting. So before I go on my digital rant, Jeremy, I'm going to fill everybody in a little bit of what this means and what this is. So bear with me a
Could
second.
I
I want to
could
read.
I could I
Good.
show what we're talking about here?
Uh,
Could I
well,
give an example?
well, here, I have that for you. So there you go. I'm gonna throw Victoria first. Let me know. You should be able to see it on your end, Jeremy.
Okay.
I'm curious here if it pops up on an overlay. Can you see it?
I cannot yet. It'll pop up here soon. It's on a little
Okay.
bit of a delay.
All right. So what I may want to do is I can move one and maybe have another pop up. So basically, what this is,
There it is. Oh yeah. Okay.
yeah. So that's I went ahead and put up Victoria's first. He's gonna beat me for doing that one, but no worries because I have my own up. Which I looked at this thing like, y'all look. Yeah, sorry, V. Yeah, black don't crack. Oh, I hope it doesn't because I'm looking at this like, oof. Oh, oh, I do not let me age this way. Oh God, do not let me age this way. I figure like take natural remedies and whatnot, but Botox away if that's the case, because I do not want to be beat AF. I'll I'll leave it there. And there you go, Victoria. That's my face instead of yours. But I wanted to give two different examples. I think yours looks better than mine. But anyway, so that's what it'll look like there. If you got something different, Jeremy, that's fine. But I just wanted to post that up. But why we do this? So let me just give you a little description of what this is. And so, pretty much in 2017, this is when they were out and about. A service called Faceapp received a wave of press for using artificial intelligence to transform pictures of faces, making them look older or younger, male or female, or adding a smile to appear happier. So they've been playing with this AI for a while, and it really has gotten famous. And here we go. I'm going to pop up a few of these. It's really gotten famous here recently because celebrities like the Jonas Brothers, Drake, Dwayne Wade, and a few others posted it up. And of course, it goes viral. And I didn't see anything until my wife posted this up or sent it to me, and then I was able to see it. And so let me read just the terms and conditions real quick on why this is really causing a little bit of ruckus here because the devil's in the details, as they say. And look, this is across many different services. So what's concerning here is in a densely worded section, it says, and I quote, grant Faceapp a perpetual, irrevocable, non-exclusive, royalty-free, worldwide, fully paid, transferable, sublicensable license to use, reproduce, modify, adapt, publish, translate, create derivative works from, distribute, publicly perform, and display your user content in any name, username, or likeness provided in connection with your user content in all media formats and channels now known or later developed without compensation to you. So before I go on and on, Jeremy, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Are you telling me I could be on the cover of Men's Fitness in Russia? Is
Yeah,
that
as an
is that
old
what
person,
you're
I guess. Like,
as an old person? I mean, I hope that I'm still this fit at 75. No, it's a strange time to live in when we're talking about the fact that our photos of future selves can be stolen and monetized by foreign governments. That's a statement I never thought I would be using at all, much less now in 2019. Um, I'm not always so concerned about these things personally, just because I have to face the facts that I am a very public person. I have done a lot to put my name out there, to put my face out there, to spread my brand or whatever, if you will.
mm-hmm.
So my face is out there. There's a lot of people who can find my face just by finding me on Twitter, at I'm a Hockey Guy. You could find me on Instagram, all of these different sort of channels that I've already posted a lot of photos myself with no real security attached to it. So personally, it is what it is. If they want to be able to use my photo royalty free, if there's a reason to use my photo that somebody would want to pay me for, then that's great. But if they would still find a reason and they wouldn't pay me for it, then I think that's pretty cool too. There's a lot of hazard that comes with it, but again, I think that it's just so, it's so out there already. There's really not much I can do about it, and I've already chosen to live that life. I've already chosen to subject myself to just constant. I one time I posted a Reddit thread, and somebody, shocker, disagreed with me on the internet, and they thought it would be funny to track down my personal Facebook profile and post a photo of me from high school as a dig, that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they could do that, that's a thing that exists, right? And so I've kind of allowed myself to get to that point. Of course, I took precautions for my personal Facebook page to make it a little bit less public, but there's so many ways out there. I've just, with millions of people downloading this app, with millions of people having some fun with it, I'm in the camp right now. Can we just have fun with this? Is this something we can all just, yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's probably not great for security, but everybody's laughing about it, man. Can we just appreciate that for a second and just, kind of just deal with the rest of it after the fact?
All right, Jeremy, you have a point. This is where you and I may slightly disagree on this one. So, which is good because we seem to agree on too many things. So it's nice to have little differences. So I think I would go maybe slightly the opposite direction. I think we've been having too much fun with it. I think we've been playing a little too fast and loose with our data, and this is going to cause us unforeseeable issues, especially in the long term. So let me give you some reasoning behind that. Okay, look what happened with Cambridge Analytica, right? We had a lot of fun, right, with these apps and people playing these games, and little did they know that during the last election season, people were using that data and whatnot as well, and this data can be used against you. And so, to back up for a second with photos, I guess my biggest issue is it's an all or nothing type of access, and it's the fact that they have access to your entire library, and you have to think of all the metadata that's in there, right? Your location, other people that you may give your face. So it's not just you that you may be giving up that information on. It may be family, colleagues, coworkers, and the like. And so I look at it from a standpoint of when is this enough? And I know, like, they'll put in, like they said, just to be fair to the company here, that they delete this thing off the servers every 48 hours. But I guess my issue is there's no way to fully verify that. And then secondary, look what happens to all these companies that get hacked. So let's say they were responsible, to a degree with it. I don't have to look any further than Target, Home Depot, so many others where they thought, hey, we're harvesting this information, but we're not going to do anything harmful with it. But then they don't secure the data, and it gets out there, and then it does cause some issues. So I guess I'm a little bit on the fence, more so on the cautious side of maybe these sort of apps we shouldn't be giving our just undivided attention to and letting them have some free reign. And maybe we need to reel it back and not post first and ask questions later, which is usually what we have
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah, no, all fun aside, it's definitely something to think about, and it's something to take seriously. Me personally, like I said, I put myself out there already. I'm less convinced that it's so dangerous for my reputation or my personality. If I see a Russian bot in this next election that's got my picture on it, then that's just going to give me a crack up. Honestly, that's just going to make me laugh a little bit. And yes, there are some people out there though that should probably take it more seriously. We've seen really unfortunate things that happened with celebrities and their galleries being hacked through iCloud. Some really unfortunate things happened for some female celebrities back a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that these same celebrities are taking part in these apps and not doing that research first, it's a little bit eye opening to the fact that there's still a lot that needs to be learned about, some education that needs to be shared there. Me personally, not an issue, so I don't really have those same concerns, but there are a lot of people who should probably be very, very concerned or very careful with these kinds of things that probably aren't. The fact that celebrities are going in and posting these photos, just I don't know what kind of photos they have on their phone now, but like all of these have processed through the AI at some point. That's the part that people forget. Now, I think it's also important to mention there's no degree of certainty that this is a malicious app, right? Like, and that's something to be very specific about. Can they do something horrible? Yes, absolutely. They have access now to a lot of things that they can use for nefarious gain. Is this possible that this is just a small company that was established to give people a laugh at their photos, and they just didn't take that much time into specifying the purpose of, why they hold data, or even just thinking about, is it easier to delete the data, or is it easier to hold it? Is it easier to, these aren't decisions you're making as a small face photo company that, you get going up against Snapchat and Instagram filters and everything. You're probably not like, what if millions of people download this app in one day? What security precautions do we need to take to make sure we're protected? That's probably not a thought process that goes through. So I do think it's fair to say that there's some level of concern to it, of course, but also there's no guarantee that they're going to take your photos and do anything bad with it. There's no guarantee that they're going to hack your entire gallery. Mm-hmm. The access is concerning. It's all perspective. Okay. It's all just being able to appreciate, the whole picture and all the nuance of it.
I guess like I look at it, and maybe because I pay attention to this type of thing, but I mean, look at deep fake videos, right? So like Victoria just said, man, not important. Russians don't care about me. And they may not necessarily care about you, but it's locally what they can do with your specific information, your specific data. And we're all data rich, right? But not receiving anything for it. And if you look at all these services that they give to you for free, you just think, oh, wow, these things are free, but there's a cost. And whether somebody's making money off of it, off of your data, off your information, which they are, because I mean, again, it's all the metadata, everything else that they get from it. I guess my other thing is, at some point, this technology is getting so good because, like, for instance, when they had a deep fake adult video with I'm trying to think of the lady actress that was in Harry Potter, like she was a kid at one point, is grown up, Emma Watson. Yeah. Created one out of her just from her public photos, right? So where this really can get dicey and where it can get concerning in the future is at some point people can post your face and make it you look places that you never were. I mean, then at one point you can't even trust video and photos anymore, and we are going to reach that point. Voices like there's a really good podcast, and you can look it up, but I remember specifically like they were talking about DNA sampling and sharing, right? And then Chinese law enforcement came over, worked with a not a doctor, that's not appropriate, like scientist from Yale. And bottom line was he taught them like looking at different DNA strands, how you can label them and attach them to different groups of people. And they took it back to their country and they seized like one guy when he landed, they detained him. They not only recorded his face at every angle, they recorded his like mouth open and closed. They had him read like a series of words, right? So they can get the way that he articulates it. Had him walk, recorded all that information. And for those of you, because I'm going to assume here, I believe safely, that many of you don't know, just Google that. Just Google like the Chinese government, like social credit, for instance. That would be a good start. And it's interesting off of just basic information that they can collect of how much not only information they can get from you, but I guess for me, and I'm going ultra paranoid here, I will admit, But I just don't like the fact that at some point in the near future, you can't even say if there's a photo of me somewhere, you can't even verify that's real. Or if a video of somebody saying something, I said something, I can now totally question it. And you, like today, we say, oh, that's not true. Look at, let's say the president says something. Oh, go look, you can see his video. Well, fast forward 10 years from now, and you may not be able to say that anymore. And so when you think of like, I mean, this can get dicey. Like you can
Yeah,
create memories. I mean,
I'm
this
going to
is
be
like
honest,
the
Terrence. Like I
beginning.
came into this with one perspective, and I think you just blew my whole mind with that. That's a scary slope. That's one perspective I hadn't thought of, and the fact that as much as we celebrate how accurate it is, I'm not gonna lie. I just texted one of the photos that I did to my mom,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I guess I got your dad, Jim, his grandpa Jim's side of the family, because my photo looks very close to my grandfather. I mean, it's one of those. Maybe it's one of those bias, like maybe I'm looking for it, so it's there, but it's very accurate. And so while I'm sitting here looking at that and staring at my mom and thinking, "Oh, it's funny, it's cool how crazy good this is." At the same time, that's very scary. You're right. The fact that I might be somewhere in 10 years that I've never been because somebody took that photo, uploaded it to some other face modification technology, and put my face on a neo-Nazi or something, and then when I tried to run for government in Canada, they're like, "Oh, you can't, man. You were a Nazi at some point."
Yeah, and
Well, hang on a second.
didn't that happen kind of semi recently, like within the past like couple of years, to where there's a fake photo up there. I think of like, was it like Oprah or not Oprah, Whoopi Goldberg or something.
Okay,
You remember
I don't
somebody
remember that
in the
one.
chat?
I've
Yeah,
seen several of them though,
and
several
and people
photoshops
and
that are
people
really
bought
good.
it, but that's just the thing. People will buy it, people will believe it, and this is just opening those cans of worms when you can put anybody out there for anything, and it's up for grabs. And look, we're gullible people. We've seen it from time and time again. We're
Yeah,
gullible. So if we can't even just decipher words that are very plainly, which we will discuss in the next topic, then I'm not. That makes me not so confident of when someone can simply overlay a face and put me anywhere at any given time. That's just a done deal. Or I can totally deny something. I was somewhere, but that wasn't me. I didn't do that. My favorite is Amber right there. That wasn't me. It was Patricia. And you know what? That's something that's in the near future here that very well could happen. And personally, I would find that a little bit concerning. But I think the bottom line for me, to kind of bring it way back for a second, is this type of thing. The fact that the majority of people just don't seem to care just shows that we still don't take our privacy seriously. That, to me, I think that's the bottom line.
yeah. One thing to remember with privacy is the definition of privacy is so muddied up constantly. I've seen people celebrate privacy as in, the government doesn't know, anything about what's in my life. They don't know where I live. They don't know where I go to dinner, where I work. They don't have all that information. I've seen people really celebrate that, but at the same time, there is a sense of security that comes with public information through things like your government. Now, if you have no trust for your government, then that's your call,
But
right?
why does
That's
it
your
have to be just
decision.
government, right? Maybe I just
But
want privacy for my neighbors. Like I got, my blinds are wide open. If I want privacy, I simply shut them, right? There's like the old analog
sure,
way of privacy, but in a digital world where cameras are more and more in every single corner, people have their phones at all times, which people get, like Kanye going off one time and getting secretly recorded. Like we're in a completely different world where, to a degree, you have to act, and this is the sad part, you have to act like nothing's ever private or sacred. And we're truly getting to that point where even in your home, right? Like another example, Amazon. Okay, cool. You got one of those nice Alexas in your home. Well, little do many people know, when you speak to it, and by the way, it's constantly listening for those words. When you speak to it, there are human beings that listen to it, right? And so a lot of people don't think for a second, wait a minute, how did this software get so well off? Is this something I'm comfortable with? Like people just don't question it. They just simply do it. And as for somebody who's very, forward thinking in technology, I think that's awesome. At the same time, I want to pump the brakes just a little bit and at least get people questioning it. I think it adds a lot of value. I think it certainly can be worthwhile in the long term, but to me, at what cost? And I guess that's what I would just openly question.
yeah. I mean, it's a good question. Like I said, the point I was making earlier about personal preference and privacy.
Mm-hmm.
there's some people out there, myself in that ballpark of if Alexa is listening in and Amazon has trained people to listen to what I'm telling Alexa how to do, and they're holding information. I mean, Amazon has so much more information about me that I care about that's through their website and through and so people get really paranoid about the fact that Alexa's listening, or your TV's listening, or your refrigerator's listening, or your appliances are listening. Um, and that's true. In some cases, they are always listening, but at the same time, that's the big point that people point to when they say, "Oh, well, you're not being protective with your privacy," and then they turn around and they go buy something on Amazon, put their credit card information in, save their credit card information to Google, and and then they're wondering why their credit card information gets hacked at some point. Because they're just throwing it around. They're going to these risky websites and they're purchasing products that aren't approved through Amazon or what have you. So it's important also to think about the fact that privacy does not just exist in these public spaces that we talk about it when we're talking about things like Faceapp or Alexa or, again, your appliances listening to what you're saying. Privacy is so huge in the sense that because you're existing in this world on the internet, while you're swiping your cards at a gas station, while you're driving and you're listening to the radio, all of that is being recorded by data somewhere. And so, to your point, it's something we can think about better for sure, to say how conscious and aware of how cognizant are we of what data is being pulled here and what's it being used for. But in some cases too, I would encourage that's paranoia it's a fine line between paranoia and responsibility, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Paranoia will cause mental illness. It will cause you to have a modified state of life. So definitely find out where that is, do the research, do your personal preferences of privacy. Again, my thing is, if the government wants to listen to everything I have to say and tell me it's because they want to keep me safe, I'm going to be more likely to trust the government on certain aspects of that, as opposed to say, like, oh, well, what does the government really want with my information? Number one, because my information is not that good. And number two, because I tend to trust the government. And if the government screws up, it's on a large scale where people find out about it. It's a big, messy thing. So I don't know. Maybe that's naive of me. Maybe that's the conspicuous millennial in me. But
there's so many issues. I like that little plug-in you did there. Well played.
yeah.
But if you look, like Nelson just said, wasn't there a talk of Facebook getting into the banking industry? Absolutely. So through Libre, which we should tackle tomorrow night for sure, because that one, honestly, I could spend a whole hour on it. Like, that is a huge deal. And to continue from there, like, when I think of a few like counterpoints, right? So when it came to, let's say, using something like Samsung Pay, Google Pay, Apple Pay, people are so slow to do it, right? Like, when it comes to, and it's funny that Nelson mentioned the banking thing, but people are real slow to trust it. They say, wait a minute, like, my money, I don't trust my money going to these things, even though there's literally every reason why those things are much better than using your credit card.
Right.
But people are slow to do it. I'm trying to think of, like, there was another example I just had on top of my head. And I was like, oh. And so when people are super slow to that one, and yet we're so quick to, when we just think of apps, like, we just don't take those type of things seriously, even though it has certain access to things that, arguably people would be concerned of, the same thing with, let's say, I remember the other one now. It was, let's say, like, State Farm. Hey, Terrence, if you want to save on your insurance, install this app. And I say, hell no. I drive an Evo. No, I'm not going to put this thing on, right? Because I know, and you could guess it by just the car that I have, but of course I drive like a bat out of hell sometimes. But why would I give those people my data where they can use it against me, right? So I'm not thinking from a monetary standpoint, oh, this can save me money. I'm quickly going, wait a minute, no. They want this information, and that's only going to work against me. And so we do that when it comes to financial, right, or things that we see or perceive as negative. But when it comes to, like, fun apps, because it has nothing to do with that particular industry, even though you give them the same permissions, you don't think of how that can affect or hurt you, even though some of that data could be sold elsewhere. Right? So that's where, to me, I just don't think people think to link those things in between. They don't. And that data is still there, and you don't need a person manually going over it to connect the dots.
It's a valuable point for sure. And I think the point of people really caring about their finances, the other thing that people are really concerned about when it comes to privacy is their children, their families, the people they care about. Privacy is one of those selective issues that people can really be really crazy about in some ways. Yeah, the Samsung, Apple Pay, Google Pay, those were some really good examples because those are proven to be far more secure than, like you said, using a credit card. You can be selective about your paranoia and how secure you want things to be. I think that
Or
sort of
caution.
comes
I don't know if I
into
word it paranoia, right? But I would say like be selective about your concern, right? What you care about. In other words, there's some things you just blatantly don't, and you don't like. That's your choice. I would just caution, of how you care. Like you should care about your digital. You're just when I say. By the way, when we say privacy, it's not for me trying to hide things. When I look at privacy, I could almost substitute it for the word of choice. I want to choose what I share. Just like in a sense, even on Facebook, even though things are open, once I put it on there, you could argue and say, well, I choose to put up what I put up. That is true. What you don't choose per se is when you give full access to that camera roll, even though you don't post it up. And let me give you a very specific example. And those of you in the chat, you may have seen this. When you're, let's say, on Facebook, have you ever noticed when you go and open it up sometimes they ask if you want to share these photos? And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I want to share this photo. Why is this photo there? That's because Facebook has access to it. You chose not to share it because you want to keep it private from the world. Good for you. But you didn't necessarily keep it private from Facebook. And that's why I want to make those ties in. Is once you give up that access, you've completely given away the keys. Once that data is uploaded, it's gone.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are good points. And paranoia is definitely not the right word for it. I think paranoia is more when you're talking about. I tend to be paranoid when it comes to money, just because of that same thing. Obviously, I'm fully educated on the ways of technology and why certain apps are more secure. But when it comes to things like PayPal and Zelle and things like that, I'm definitely paranoid about who I'm involving myself with on those apps, because I don't know what access they have on their side. I don't know what
complete sense.
intentions they have on and I'm paranoid when I get to gas stations. I'm always pulling at the gas station pumps to make sure that there's not a scammer or a scanner, scammer in there.
Oh, yeah.
Just because we've seen it so many times,
it happens. It happens all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had my corporate card replaced, and then thankfully my cousin Chanel, she worked in the banking industry for quite some time, and she was like, don't use the pumps that's furthest from the view, right? Because they like to go to those outside ones where people can't see them tampering with, versus more so the in line of sight. And I've taken that wholeheartedly ever since. Like anytime I go to use it, with the exception of I noticed like in Florida where you're at, like you're not there anymore. Jeez,
not anymore.
You're everywhere. But anyway, so Florida where you once were, like Wawa, those gas stations, like they had it at the pump, where I could literally just use NFC right there at the pump. And then Exxon, I know I use their app all the time, where I go to the app, it uses location, I can choose the pump, pay right there through, Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, whatever, and you're good to go. You've done it remotely. So I do like those type of options. But anyways, I digress. I can go on and on.
Yeah, no, and I just came from the banking industry for the last couple of years as well. So I do have some firsthand knowledge of the security side. We had a very intense VP of security, cybersecurity at the bank, who educated us on all kinds of things that would terrify and make anybody paranoid when it came to how they're using their money and where it's going. So yeah, to really round the discussion, it's definitely something where we have to be more concerned than we are right now, because this app literally swept the world. I didn't hear anything about it until last night. I was on Xbox with a friend of mine, and he said, "What's this thing with all the old people posting photos?" And I said, "I don't know what that means." But he said everybody's posting photos of themselves, but as an old person. Yeah, and immediately, cool. Terrence, my reaction went to, how do I get a photo of myself as an old person? Like, what do I have to do?
What you would look like? I think
because I have major FOMO, right? Like that's just who I am. So,
well, you like to stay with the trends. Who doesn't like to stay with the trends?
Exactly. So I immediately downloaded it, saw a photo of myself, got a laugh out of it, and then of course, started seeing these articles coming up, and I did some research and I read into it. Mm-hmm. I'm just optimistic that it's not one of those insecure and malicious things that people are sort of making it out to be, because I also don't like this fear-mongering sense of, anybody who wants a clickbait article can just say like Russia has your data now and they're going to use it in the 2020 election. Like that's not actually true in any way.
No, and
but that's part of it too.
Well, that is a fair point as well, because look, I would admit, like, certain things when it comes to Russia and China in particular, I can see the reason for pause, primarily because unlike the United States, which by the way, I know we had this conversation before, but this is why our government should not be ran like a business. For people who say that, oh, the government should be ran like a business. No, otherwise you would be China or Russia and you intervene. So with that, because there's such close ties, I see where people can be concerned. Like there was a whole thing with what's that one app? It's like the Grinder app, right? It's for the gay community. So a lot of people don't know that that is actually owned by China, and or Chinese company, I should say, but Chinese company. I suppose are almost one and the same these days. But the concern is, especially in countries where they don't tolerate that, that can be a big issue because they can get the information on, especially people that may have a higher stature in society, right? So imagine if you're a congressperson and you've been on Grindr quite a few times. Well, you may not be out in the open, but that's an easy way to bait people and say, hey, do this or else. And we know that's always just been a thing since the dawn of time. Sometimes to get people to do something is, hey, a little blackmail will get people to kind of hush and, go a particular way from time to time. So I get where that is a concern, but at the same time, I can understand also the counterpoint is, well, if you lived your life that way with everything, then you could literally drive yourself crazy or just not deal with the digital world, right? And that's not exactly the right move either. So I think maybe it's like we got to take a step back and find some sort of medium point to say, okay, what is this? Is it worth my time? And maybe, and this is dicey in itself, some people give, let's say, Apple a lot of hell because of the way that they monitor their app store, right? And Google's a little bit more loosey goosey with those rules, which we've seen the issues with both. The issue with Apple is that you can't always turn around. Oh, Gina has popped up, y'all. Let's see. Words matter, not paranoia. Secure. Agreed, Gina.
Fair
She
point.
said government should be run as a business. Great point. Okay, cool. So interesting to hear what you have to say, Gina. So please, at all times, pop in. But back to that point is I think we just have to find some sort of middle ground to say, wait a minute, this company here, I don't know them. Like I know Facebook and I kind of know the devil I'm dancing with, but this new company, who are they? Kind of follow the money and get to know them a bit. I got to double check. I should know this better. I do know in the App Store, they will tell you the name of the developer. You can go to their website and kind of do your research quickly right there where the apps are hosted. I'm pretty sure the same. I've done that before on Google Play, but it's been some time, so I don't know if anything's changed. But maybe that's something we do have to start doing and have these open conversations.
Yeah, I mean, those conversations are all very important. Asking those questions is definitely something that we have to get a better job, make a better job, make a better habit of doing. I think I don't think we're going to solve this, right? Like, there's no way to do it. It's very interesting the approach that society has taken with this specific app, and I think that one takeaway from this could be that also, while we're having this kind of a discussion, we're starting to appreciate a little bit more different perspectives. I know the next time this happens, I will be far more concerned or careful or secure in, maybe should I do this? Should I do some research into it? Because you made some points that I hadn't considered, and I'm really now I'm looking at it from a different lens. So if this is the thing that comes from society making this potential mistake or this error in judgment, then I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either. We learn most from our mistakes as individuals and as a collective unit, especially if this is, like I said, an app that's not nefarious or not trying to steal our information for any reason. This is just a fun little thing that got out of hand a little bit, but it also taught us a lesson in the end. Well, this is just an after-school special, isn't it?
Yeah, well, taught us. I can't say the mass majority, but hey, we'll see where that goes. All right, so since we're 30 minutes in, now I want to divert attention to one of your favorite topics. Oh, this is where I'm sure it's going to heat up a little bit, especially Nelson, if you're around. Gina, always love to hear your thoughts. Okay, we have to talk about this latest tweet. So, before I post it up, and let me know when I can go ahead and just put it on the display, Jeremy, but run us through our next topic. I'm going to take a sip of water. This is going to be a minute.
So, a couple of times over the last few episodes that we've done, we've been talking about immigration. We've been talking about, what it means to be respectful of people's ethnicities and where they come from. And I know that we've talked about the fact that you deal with certain aspects of that on a regular basis, and that there are other people who sometimes feel like it's okay to say negative things that point out the fact that your ancestors may not be from the same land that their ancestors are from. And we have discussed this, and I think you made the great point. You said, I don't think it's right to ever tell anybody to go back to where they came from. This is something that's strange for me because I was told to go back to where I came from every day of my life growing up, because I was a proud Canadian growing up in the United States during the school year,
Mm-hmm.
and South Park was a thing. So everybody who had seen South Park would say to me, blame Canada or go back to Canada if you don't like the way things go. And of course, I've done such
Oh my God.
a good job as an adult of publicizing my opinions, mostly negative about certain aspects of our government, and regularly get told to go back to Canada. So all of this aside, now it seems the trend is to find somebody who is brown or of Hispanic descent or of really I'm not sure where the line is here. It's not my judgment call, but it's somebody has decided that there's a line, and tell them to go back to where they came from. So it first started out with the Burger King manager. The manager at Burger King was dealing with an unruly customer. The customer said, go back to Mexico. Just something about Trump's going to build a wall and you're going to be on the other side of it. And then, of course,
can't see, but go ahead.
Yeah, and then, of course, we had the coup de grace, and a time when the president could really step up and say, this is not okay. This is not something we should be criminalizing or justifying any sense of racism by associating each person of different skin tone with this idea that they're not from here originally. He went the other way, and if you want to say that, and decided that 4 Congress people who'd called him out, who had all of some Hispanic or cultural descent that's not Caucasian, to go back to where they came from.
Oh,
he tweeted it.
Let me
you
go
can
ahead
put the
and
whole
post
tweet
that
up.
So
Yep.
If you're watching, I'm going to assume, maybe you didn't see it, right? Nelson, I know you did. You said I saw that clip. So let me go ahead and so you can see this here on the screen. But all right, so I'm just you can see it right there, but I'll just read it just in case because this does go on an audio only version. But pretty much the president tweeted, and I quote, "So interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from other countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt, and inept anywhere in the world, even or if they even have a functioning government at all, now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then come back and show us how." So first off, run-on sentences like a mofo. Like, where did he attend school? Anyway.
Trump University.
So let's talk about what's wrong with this. And I'm just going to point out, and I'm going to open it up for a second for anybody in the chat, and you, Jeremy. I think the biggest thing, and I'm just going to stick to one point in time because we know this and go on for a moment. So some people don't see an issue with this, but the main issue I see, and there's many here, is that notice what he said. He said the Democrat congresswoman who originally came from countries whose governments are complete, right? So he put that. And then on the second tweet, that was a continuum of that, he said, why don't they go, here we go. Why don't they go back and help fix the total broken places from which they came? That's the issue I take with it. I'm like, do you not realize that some of these people were born here? That's not true of all of them, right? But I'm like, what do you mean from which they came? Like, your words. Oh my God. So anyways.
Well, I mean, and the part that I take away from this, and probably the most concerning and the most disappointing, is that these were 4 people who came out against his words, against the fact that he was saying something that was, or he was endorsing, or the things that he was doing that was considered to be racist, or against the fact that he was supporting their cause, working in their cause. It wasn't about Democrats versus Republicans. It wasn't about election versus, 2020 election versus now. It was about major issues that these 4 congresswomen have opinions on. They stood up and they offered their opinion. And in a world and a time when opinions are so important and being able to share those opinions is so important in a way that makes it valuable to the conversation, instead of even identifying their opinions as valid, he basically just threw them out of the country. And not physically, obviously, but he to a large portion of people that exist in this country who listen to his word and take it as gospel, essentially told them these people don't matter because they're not from here. They're also not white, and they're also not right. and they don't have any chance to, they don't have any say in this. They shouldn't be in this discussion. He delegitimized a very important argument from a very important side of representatives, and also a community of people that we were celebrating when the Democrats ended up winning the elections in the midterms, taking over the House. And a lot of those were some of these congresswomen who had paved new ways for people who weren't just not born in this country, but also women and people who have these same opinions. So it was delegitimizing in that sense. It was so uneducated of a discussion. There was no point that was really. It's like that scene from Billy Madison. At no point in that rambling incoherence of any response did anybody gain anything from it. Like there was nothing that had any value in that except for him to ignite his base. And I don't know how many people have seen the clip so far. One of the most disturbing things I've seen in American politics in history is Trump standing in front of a crowd at his rally tonight, and they're chanting, "Send her back." At first, we had "Lock her up" in regards to Hillary Clinton, who,
and it's still here, by the way. They still do that from time to time.
Send her back is the new one, and it's in regards to Ilhan Omar. And that's just terrifying. That's really upsetting. That's some things that you hope in 2019 that you'll never have to see. But not only are we seeing it, but we're seeing it from the president of the United States, and it's upsetting.
Well, it's a mob mentality, and like Gina brings up a good point. She says it's like me saying gay marriage is legal, right? If you don't like it, then leave my country, right? Like that's crazy. That's crazy talk when you think about it. And wasn't his whole campaign on that things were messed up, right? And you needed to make it great again, right? I'm like, ugh, the irony in that statement. It's like, look, what's great about our republic is that we're able to have these sort of discussions and we're able to have these challenges. And I'm under the impression, and I'm curious what everybody else has to say, but I'm just under the impression, look, this dude just doesn't like any sort of powerful women, period. Unless they are literally like a Russian doll that literally just listens to his words and is obedient. He doesn't seem to like any of them, right? Grab him by the fill in the blank, to let you do whatever, a celebrity. You speak up, he's like a whack. He tries to whack you down. And I'm just like, what's up with this dude? Like, I just don't get it. And to your point with the whole rally, look, I don't care whether I disagree with people or not. Never would I say things of that nature. And the 2 points, right, is from, let's say, like, lock them up or lock her up. They did it at Hillary, but they did it also at recent rallies where that would come through with any of his opponents. And think of how dangerous that is. If somebody is your political opponent, you don't like them, and the mob says lock them up and you don't correct them, what kind of society does that sound like? And I give you a hint. It's not an American free world one. It's not a democratic society, right? And so I just don't think those things should be celebrated, accepted, or even allowed, right? Like he should have stepped up and said, hey, whoa. Like, we may not like this person, but these are not the things we say. And then send them back. Like, really? I mean, what happened? Are the Native Americans going to get together next and say, you know what? We don't like where things are going. We're just going to send you all packing. Right? Like, where does this end? Why do we get a rite of passage? They don't. So this is just a snowball of ignorance that is coming down from the upper level of our society. And personally, I just think it's disgusting. It's unacceptable.
Well, it's funny because we've obviously in our roles and our jobs, we've had a lot of talk about what's important to say online and social media. And I've been super aware of that specifically, making sure I don't say anything that would represent myself in a bad way. And as I'm sitting here, like thinking, should I tweet something? Should I say this? Should I do this? The president of the United States, the leader of the free world in a lot of people's minds, sends out the most hateful, bigoted, racist. It was a very racist comment, racist things you could think of. And not only is it not seen that way by a lot of the people who support and admire him, it's encouraged, it's supported.
Look what Nelson just posted out, right? And I'll just read it. I know you can see it right there. But he said, at the moment, the leaders of the Republican Party are sending a message that racism is okay. The number of Republicans who will not admit that Trump's tweet is racist is shameful. And you know what? I'm going to have to agree with that. Clearly, Monica does as well. It's crazy to me. Like, at what end will they continue to allow this to occur, right? And, I mean, look, it's gotten so crazy. Even, I myself, a normal civilian, this is why I feel like I have to pipe up and say something about it. It's just crazy to me. And then I just got 2 more, and then, we'll carry on. But like Gary just pointed out, his comics are dog whistles to do 2 things. 1, get his fans excited, and 2, paint the whole Democratic Party as a far left. And I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what he does each and every time. And last but not least, Penny here. Doesn't the left cheer when their leaders talk down on Trump? None of it is okay, but it's coming from both sides. And so I will slightly disagree with that a little bit. And this is why I want to paint clearly why I would disagree with it. It's one thing if, let's say, someone mentions Trump's name and you boo them, right? Because you just don't like them. That's one thing when you do it that way. But when you say things like lock people up or send them back, that is a completely different thing. That's completely different. So I just don't want the two to get, convoluted or put on the same plane because they're not weighed the same. And then
Yeah.
Gina here.
I also let me just comment on that
Sure.
one too real quick. I also think that it's important that we don't try and make that comparison because I can't remember the last time any Democratic leader has come out and said the things that Donald Trump has said. If Donald Trump stands in front of a crowd and says anything, he's likely to get booed in certain areas of society because of who he is and what he represents and what he has done. The fact that his supporters ignore that doesn't change the fact that it still offends people. That doesn't change the fact that it still gives people the message that, yes, this man is racist. Yes, this man has said and done things that say he's a racist.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't excuse it because, oh, well, wouldn't the left boo him? Yes, of course the left would boo him, but not because of who he is, but because of what he has said and because of who he has shown to be.
Well, I think of both. I think of both, but the difference is a boo is just a sign of disagreement, right? Like you just don't like them. And you know what? Tough. You got to be able to deal with that. I think the difference is when somebody runs a campaign and says, "Oh yeah, hit him in the mouth. I pay your legal bills." Like that is creating a whole other level. Like these two are not on the same. This is a seesaw where one is way down and one is way up on a scale here, and they're not the same. And I agree with Gina here, not to let him off so easily calling it ignorance because it's wrong straight up. Yeah, and even a kid would know that. I totally agree. And then Monica here, he's pandering to his audience and the lowest common denominator. And the second one here, he's allowing to express the hatred they hidden for so long. Hashtag sad times. And again, just what I'm seeing here, and let me draw another distinction to be clear. Just because somebody is a Trump supporter doesn't put them in that same bracket. So I want to be super clear on that because I have very good friends and close relatives that are, even I don't agree with them, Trump supporters that certainly don't have this sort of hatred and they don't agree. But at these rallies where it's broadcasted, where people chant this, look, that's some next level stuff right there. Like that's crazy to me. And so I just wanted to draw that difference there because I don't want anybody to feel like, hey, I'm a Trump supporter, but I'm not a racist person. That's true because they're definitely out there. But at the same time, you can't deny that there are people within the party that you're supporting, and I don't know how often you're speaking out about it, but you can't deny that this is the type of people that are showing up at these rallies, and they're the representation. That's like me saying, hey, if I work for company X here, I'm a good person, but my company's been known to, let's say, do crazy loans, let's say having crazy interest rate, to poor people and doing all these shady acts. I may be a good person, but the company I'm working for, if that's what they're repping and I'm part of that, there still is some sort of repercussions that come from that. And you have to own it. And Nelson here, racism is not coming from both sides. Super true. Why can't supporters of Trump call him out or at least seek understanding as to why his tweets and rhetoric is perceived as racist? And again, I would agree. I think at some point you got to say, hey, wait a minute. It's just like if I had a relative, right, that I really supported, I really loved, if they did something wrong, I don't just say, "Oh, I'm just not going to say anything." No, I say, "Look, I love you. However, we have to have this discussion here. You have to call it out. You have to." And there's been too many times where there's free passes or there's excuses, and the excuses are always the same, which is, well, the other side X, Y, and Z, or Obama did this, or so and so did that. And I think this is where we get into like this perpetual swing here of where we keep blaming or shifting, projecting, and that's just got to stop. That's just irresponsible.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And one of the things that through the election process in 2016 was so prevalent was the whataboutisms. And this is, well, Trump did this, but what about Hillary? What about when she did this? So to flip it around a little bit for an example and sort of a counterpoint to that,
Mm-hmm.
remember when Hillary used the term basket of deplorables in the
Yeah, poor
rallies.
choice, like a dumb,
And
but
it was it was a horrible choice of words.
yeah.
It was something that a lot of people embraced as Trump supporters to say, okay, I'm a proud deplorable because that's what she says I am because I'm a supporter of Donald Trump. Now, if you take her at her words, she didn't say that anybody who supports Donald Trump is a deplorable person. That was what the message that was sent to Trump's base was, that anybody who supports him is a deplorable, according to Hillary Clinton. So the message there, and this could be one of the comments that lost Hillary Clinton the election, the message there was that anybody who votes for Trump as a voter, as a registered person in the United States, a citizen of this country, is considered deplorable. So when Donald Trump says things like to the 4 congresswomen, and let's just go through the list here really quickly. Ilhan Omar, born in Somalia. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, born in the Bronx, New York.
Exactly.
Rashida Tlaib was born in Detroit, Michigan, and Ayanna Pressley was born in Chicago, Illinois. So one person out of the 4 was actually born in another country. But when he lumps this whole discussion into go back to where you came from, it's impossible for anybody with logic to sit there and say, oh, well, he's saying to go back to the states where they represented, to go back to the cities that they were born in, because he's not saying to go back to other places. He's saying go back to where the government is broken. So he's saying go back to Somalia, go back to wherever he thinks these congresswomen are from that they're actually not from.
Yeah, and let's be real. That's exactly what people say when they mean
Of
ill-fate the
course,
person.
of course. So my point, the counterpoint to that, to juxtapose it to the basket of deplorables comment, if you're saying that as a basket of deplorables, one of the deplorables, that you're a voter in this country and that you can't support Hillary Clinton because she thinks you're deplorable because you support Donald Trump, as somebody who supports a lot of the same things that these congresswomen support, as somebody who was born in this country but has ancestors who were born in other countries, as somebody who honestly fits the bill with the same bill with these congresswomen, just because the things that I believe and also the fact that my ancestors were also not born in this country, is he telling me, a voter, and is he telling a lot of the people that are watching the stream right now as voters, that they don't belong here, that they shouldn't be here, that they shouldn't have a place to vote in the election, that they shouldn't have a voice in this country's democracy? And what it comes back to is, it comes back to a really important need, something that I think we really need to focus on through the midterm elections, and also through opportunities where we elect people to stand in line for us at the government.
Okay.
To remind the president of the United States that this is not a business. This is not his office. He is not the CEO. He works for us. We are the stakeholders. We are the shareholders. He's only in power because we put him there. So he has to do what we tell him to do. And if he just told more than half the country that they need to go back to where their ancestors came from, that's racist, and that's a problem.
Which, by the way, even Mike Pence jokingly said, "What it sounds, Well, no, actually, it wasn't Mike. Let me take that back. He
Mike
may
Pence
have,
doesn't
but
joke.
there's another one who said, "What, a third term is looking more and more." And I'm like, a third term? No, that's not how this works. What happened to the person that was supposed to respect the office, right? You guys are supposed to rule of law, and yet that's so interesting that it's applied to everybody but you. And so, I look at this sort of statement here, and I just think to myself, like, this here, it just really showcases the issues that we have. And to speak from somebody from just my own seat here. So Monica just said, from someone who has a family of Hispanic descent, comments like this have been hurled at me and people like me for as far back as I can remember. And it's hurtful. And I would agree. It's like, what do you say? Like, everybody wants to feel like they're a part of something and that they belong, right? And that's just natural, just being human 101, right? It's in I'm going to mess this up here. Uh, I'm going to even retract from it because I can't even think of it. It's like Marvo's law, whatever, hierarchy of needs. I just chopped up his name, but whatever. His 2 wives weren't even born here. Exactly. But you know what? If he doesn't like what they'll do, I'm sure he'll just ship them back. To me, I'm just looking at like this, like it's crazy. I'm sitting here even tripping because I can't even believe like this is really a thing. Like this should never really be a thing whatsoever. And to bring it on back for a little bit, it's like, again, just knowing that nobody really is from here. And without going into like the debatable parts of immigration and borders, it's like, look, we're all here born on this planet, and we're where we're at. Thank you, Maslow's. And I'm like Mavlow's instead of Maslow's. Thank you, Monica. And so It just, to me, it's just amazing that this sort of thing can be said and people are literally picking and choosing how they want to interpret it. Where you really don't fool yourself, you know where this comes from. And when somebody can turn around and say, Mexicans, these bad hombres, most of them, he said, and literally, that they're rapists, all this other stuff. And he said from there that, and he can assume that some are good people. To assume that some are good people is to also say that most of them, the majority, are not. That there's very few, and this is his line of thinking. And you really have to pay attention over time what he tweets out and what he puts, because he's really showing you how his mind works. And to me, I'm like, could we not put a bigger idiot in office? I'm sorry, I know there's people out there who really love this guy, but this dude's an idiot. I don't know how else to serve you, other than to say this guy, this has got to end. This has got to stop. This is pathetic. It's crazy.
Well, and
I was
I know
talking
there's a
on
lot
my
of people
rant.
out there who would disagree with your assessment that he's an idiot
Yeah.
because they'll say things like he can't be an idiot because he's so smart about how he's controlling the media cycle, how he's controlling the conversation, how he's doing these things. And my point to that is, if you're going to appreciate somebody who uses things like racism and bigotry and these horrible commentaries of society to direct attention and to control the media populace, you're supporting the wrong person. That's a very dangerous thing to do. That's how we end up, with countries like North Korea, countries like China, where a lot of the public persona is what is made by the government. We cannot let this president forget once again that he works for us, because the minute we do, he'll pull the wool over our eyes and he'll make sure that something happens that nobody had any part in. And we've already seen these threats with things like Iran and these discussions that are very concerning for that. When he makes decisions like taking us out of the Paris Accord for climate change, these decisions that are being made on our behalf, but also not on the behalf of most Americans. If you look at the decisions that he's made and some of the voting and the polling that comes with those decisions, a lot of them are primarily negative perceptions and negative disagreements with those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a country with the 2020 election coming up, it's very important to focus on, when you're finding a candidate, somebody to not just run against Donald Trump, but also to put themselves in a position where they could be the replacement in office of somebody that actually stands up for the people. You have to take into account things like, yes, he may come across as a massive idiot, and he may say things that make him seem like he has no education. He has no sense of what a run-on sentence is, or where vocabulary comes from, or any of the things that you could point to. But also point to the fact that he's very dangerous in his thinking. And the patterns that you were just mentioning are patterns that you should be very much concerned about when you're talking about somebody who looks at themselves as a sort of a dictator or an authoritarian ruler, when we have an opportunity to correct the path in some way and sort of go back in the right direction.
A leader who doesn't read, who doesn't listen to his generals, right? As they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. Look, he knows very well media and how to play it. He's been doing this very well in the 80s and 90s. Look, from that point, he gets it. And honestly, he's one of the best politicians, if you want to be even more honest about it. People thought, oh, we're going to have an outsider come in, and yet he's one of the best at the game. But a few things I wanted to point out here. Penny, shouldn't we fight for legal immigration? You're right. We are all descendants from immigrants. That's what makes our country, or this country, great. Yes, we agree. We actually talked about this last time. There's a lot of fine print and some interesting things as why that has not happened over the years, which is a great conversation that we'll eventually have to revisit. Monica, according to him, there are some good people that showed up to Charlottesville. Yeah. Nelson, why is money so much more important than our society? The cost of our society is priceless. And then TRT is only an idiot for the job he currently holds. His tax returns and his resume, that's why he does not want us to see. It shows his work history. Of course, there's no reason, honestly, to really fight so hard for that one. And I think, by the way, I'm just going to go ahead and call it here. I think eventually that is going to come out, specifically his taxes, because when you read it, they shall furnish and give those up. Shall means you will. He can prolong it and delay it. It's coming. Just sit tight. And then you can make your judgments from there. But I think that's certainly
Yeah, I
coming.
think his transcripts from high school and
Oh,
college will be right behind it,
oh,
and that'll
and
be
look, and
even
look,
more
like,
eye opening.
and look, there's a thing here of where, I'm trying to find some sort of common ground. And look, there's some things that he does do well, or that I would agree that he may be right on, right? Like, okay, for instance, to challenge China, I think he's completely right on that. Um, Border security, again, we think he's right on that. There's so many things we think he's right. It's the way he goes about it, and that's where I don't want things to get dicey on it, right? And so we have to stop and say there's a clear difference between, okay, the topic, what he's choosing to go after. I think most people are in agreement, right? Border security. I think everyone can agree that border security is definitely an important thing. Again, the way you go about it. And so when I look at these tweets, just kind of keep the conversation a little bit on the rails here, I just look at these and say, look, like, don't divert here from the fact that you don't have a plan. These women are coming at you with plans and are challenging your ideas. And you know what? Get your act together, get your administration together. There's got to be a reason why so many of these people are coming and going, right? I mean, this is unprecedented. We never had this, to where so many people are here. Then he fires them. And when he was asked, like, his one regret, he said, who was it? Jeff Sessions was his one regret. I'm like, of all the things you've done, your one regret is this to Jeff Sessions because he wouldn't unrecuse himself from it. Like, this is crazy. This is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about this in the past, and I will always harp on the fact that motivation is the number one thing that you can judge somebody's character based on, because it's always the main driver of the things that they do and the things that they say. There's a big piece of our society that's broken right down the middle, and people seem to think that they can only be motivated by ideas that support their line of thinking, and other people on the other side that can feel like they can only be motivated by others that share their line of thinking. I don't want a Democrat in the White House. I don't want a Republican in the White House. I want somebody who understands the importance of having both ideas, who understands the importance of working with both ideas of thought, because those are the two things that define, or the two ideas. I don't want any two-party system, to be completely honest.
No.
But those are the two parties of thought and the two groups of thought that have been represented through our democracy for so long, that I want somebody who appreciates and understands the fact that they have to work with the other party, because there's so many other people who benefit or who would not benefit from these decisions that are being made. Until we get somebody who is so opposite Trump in that regard, I think we're going to continue to see this decline in society's view of each other, the conversations, the fact that I have lost friends because they disagree with my politics. I have not made friends, or I have not added in-laws on Facebook because I know that they would just disagree with my politics
You
so
and I are in
much.
that same boat. I got booted off. But it
Yeah.
goes to show you, though. So you're uncovering a bigger glaring issue here, and this is where it's not just our policies. It's even us, right? The people, like, we've grown weak. And when I say we've grown weak, I mean we literally have lost our morals. We've lost our way. We've lost our values. And to give you like a few examples of that, we had somebody in office, and that was President Obama, right? He wanted to work across the aisles. What happened when he tried to work across the aisles, right? He got fought tooth and nail. One thing about the Democrats that I can give a little grief on the Democrats is, look, Republicans come together no matter what. And that sounds good, but the problem is they're too good at coming together where they let all these things just pass. Where Democrats will kind of fight over each other. Look what's happening right now with Pelosi and AOC, right? So you got like this the youthful squad pack, right? Then you got Nancy, and they should be maybe holding hands and going it together. But when they have disagreements, they speak about it. So it's interesting because that's the way it should happen. But the problem is when we're trying to do that, when people are trying to have these conversations, that's not the party that seems to win. And everything is, play and stretch the rules, and that's acceptable. So let me give you a few examples of that. Gerrymandering. We know this cannot be good. We know this is not a good thing. The census that happens every 10 years, and the real reasoning behind the fact that they wanted to ask that immigration question so that they can, of course, skew the Bernie Warren 2020. I could be with that. Where they skew the demographics, right? And they can pick and choose their constituents, which is exactly what gerrymandering is. That should never be a thing, but it's something because legally, right? The Supreme Court looked at it and said, well, legally, that's okay. And so if one party is going to play this way, well, Democrats, and you better just play by it. And just think about what that causes. And so this is where it doesn't matter, one party or another can try to have this good moral ground, but yet the other party, because legally, technically, they can do it, they're gonna push it, and all that is just gonna ensue chaos. I just don't see the real win here. I don't see the out until the people say, you know what, enough already. This isn't acceptable. Start putting term limitations and really start shaking out the system. Because just putting a different person in, if the other side doesn't want to play and they've got a majority, whether it's the House, GOP, or whatever, they don't have to play, and that's it. And you're gridlocked. And we've seen that. We've seen that during the Obama era, and now we see what happens now. And so I really just don't see this.
Yeah, at the risk of going down a rabbit hole of let's fix our government in a podcast, I think the one idea that I've ever heard that is so powerful and so I think beneficial to both sides and both discussions of both topics of conversation is to have a much larger group of not political minds, but more just the people, right? The people who have volunteered to say, I want to be involved in politics, similar to how a jury is selected for a trial, have a much larger, whether it's by state, by county, by anything, but a large majority of that population who have decided that they want to get involved in politics and they want to be involved in the lawmaking. To have them be the ones that are responsible with holding politicians accountable, but not for a paid position, but something where people like you and I who have these opinions, who want to be involved, who want to actually help, can do more than just vote, but can actually put themselves in a position where they can say, my vote doesn't just go on paper. It's also something that I can be public about and that I can tell you directly, and you can hear the feedback from your constituents that really want to give you that feedback. We've done a really poor job in this country of continuously providing these open forums and these open lines of communication with the most moronic and most irresponsible people really at the front talking for us. So I think if there was some way to orchestrate a discussion through those minds, the people who actually care about the places that they're voting, the places that they're trying to be coordinated, number one, it would raise the political interest in a way that gets people more involved in things like voting and things like fighting against the atrocity of gerrymandering. Like it's not even a point that anybody who has any idea about it should be debating, anybody on either side, but it is, and because people don't know about it. So that's the first point I'll make. The second point I'll make is if you put all of the politicians in Washington in a room together and you put them all in a discussion and you said, get along, right? Ignore the party lines for a second. Understand that we all know your friends behind the scenes. We all know that you go out to drinks, you spend time at family functions. When you see politicians working together publicly, they're saying we came up with this bill together. That means you're sitting in a room together and you're coming up with these ideas in a way that's productive to the conversation and to the end outcome.
Well,
so if the responsibility is on the politicians to have those discussions, they should be forced to have discussions about the things that we want them to have discussions about. They should not be forced to sit into a room or given the option to come up with these laws that benefit them, number one, their pocketbooks for lobbying. They shouldn't be coming up with these laws that help their political arena, their area only. They should be more focused with
101.
Yeah, they should be more focused on their entire constituency. But more importantly, they should be forced to have a chance to learn each other's opinions and sort of talk out each other's discussions a little bit. I would love to be a fly on the wall hearing Republicans and Democrats talking about these tweets that Trump put out this weekend, because I have a feeling there's a lot of Republicans out there who are facepalm, shake my damn head, all these horrible, sort of like, I can't believe he did that privately, but refuse to do it publicly for whatever reason.
That happens. Oh, we know the reason. The reason that they don't do it publicly is because they don't want their party to turn against them. And look, they want to stay in power. They want to stay where they're at. So they'll secretly say, yeah, I don't like, it's like your boss, right? So imagine if you didn't like what your boss was saying. You say to yourself, I could speak up, but I don't want to be booted out of here. I don't want my coworkers to turn against me. So we're all going to secretly talk poo emoji behind their back about it, but we're just going to let it be. That's exactly what happens here. And a few points that came up. Autumn, by the way, I'm pretty sure Jeremy and I both agree with you. And she said, everyone who says that it wouldn't be in centers, and this is regarding immigrants, just in case on the podcast, so you get a little context here. But everyone who says that they wouldn't be in centers if they came here legally, most of them who are in those detention centers are seeking asylum. They have no idea the harsh and dangerous environment that they are wanting to escape. These pro immigration people literally think every brown person who speaks Spanish is from Mexico. It's simply racism from the office. Yeah, I have to say,
Can't
couldn't agree
disagree with it.
more. I say you go there first, and then you'll see why some people come back or seek asylum. Nelson agreed, and then Robert, and this is interesting. Robert said, "What good is voting if the majority of voice isn't heard?" And so that there, not saying you, Robert, is a person, but I want to get very specific here. That comment right there scares the shit out of me. I'm just gonna go ahead and say the word. I probably have to bleep it out for a podcast. But anyway,
Sure,
um,
IST.
so the reason why this concerns me is look what happened with Trump. Bottom line, if the majority of people actually voted, we know where this. I mean, popular vote. We know who won already. I heard so many people say, and I was one of them, by the way, that would agree with this assessment, but I still did differently. So many people said, "Oh, Trump, this guy, there's no way this idiot could win the presidency." I was also one of them, like, there's just no way this dude's gonna be handed the keys to the White House, no way. And even some of like my friends that really support him definitely threw it in my face, and rightfully so afterwards. But what's interesting is I know so many people have said, yeah, no, I'm not going to go vote. Like, this is going to be a landslide. This is going to be a landslide. I think that's the issue. I think everybody has to say, wait a minute, strength is in numbers. It's like, okay, what good is, let's say, if a rope is going to save your life from a helicopter, I could say, what good is one string going to do to save your life? Absolutely nothing. You're right. But it's the many that band together that actually forms the rope that saves your life that makes it good. Voting to me is no different here. Does your one singular vote make the difference? Well, on a micro versus macro level, that's where the yes and no comes in. But the moment that we, the youth, the young generation, does that, one thing I can guarantee you that older people and usually Republicans, no offense to you guys, one of the main things they do is they sit together, they get out and vote. Hands down. I called myself out last time. I said, you know what? I also never voted like mid elections or in those primaries. I never did it, to be honest with you. And like, I didn't do my due diligence as a citizen. I didn't, right? And I own up to it. And it did take this president getting into office and seeing the things that I see to say, you know what? It's unacceptable that I don't get involved, and I have to do better as a citizen, and that's why I do it. And to turn it back to you, Jeremy, because Nelson called you out here, he said, that's a great idea, Jeremy, but we, the politicians, are bound to their constituents. We, the people, control what our politicians bring back to Congress. The real issue is that there is no focus on local election. And I agree. I have been a part of that issue, as an example.
Yeah, I tend to agree with certain aspects of that as well, especially the fact that there's not much of a focus on local elections. As far as the politicians, bound by the constituents, and it's on the politicians to bring back to Congress how we feel. I would agree that that's how it should go. I would agree that that's how it's supposed to be, that that's how democracy is built. The problem is that we, the people, are not politicians. It's not our responsibility to write laws and to right wrongs. We will give, in the 2019 era of social justice, we will give a lot of opinions about things that we think should be different. Mm-hmm. And we will give the congresswomen and men in our representation to the power to change it. But then there's also another portion of people talking to them, but with money in their hands saying, no, don't change it or do something different. Really, the issue is not that there is an issue with local elections. I will not say that that's not an issue. But I'll say that the real problem with our Congress specifically is the fact that there is more incentive from major corporations, from the top 1%, from the earners that are actually controlling the conversation and the topics of discussion on Capitol Hill. There's more of an incentive for the people in Congress to listen to those conversations and to raise those issues and to talk about those problems than there is to talk about the issues of the people who are standing at their door going, hey, how am I supposed to pay for my food on $8 an hour at Walmart? How am I supposed to provide any sort of health to my family if my company provides me with medical plans that are so bad that I have to go to my bank and get a flexible health savings account so that I can even afford it. These types of injustices are the ones that don't get talked about because, number one, they're not as sexy of a conversation, and also because there's so much that's going against it, and there's so many people that are fighting against having that conversation that have so much more pull. And I won't generalize that discussion being that Republicans are primarily in here. Obviously, there's two sides to the Congress, and there's two sides that should make this happen. Both sides are subject to things like lobbying and these major conversation points. Having the constituents be front and center, I think, is the best way to give them that. Basically, the idea of putting that money into the hands of the people who have these real issues, instead of the people who are making up issues just to benefit themselves at the end of the day. That's where we really win as a society. And local elections like mayors and townships and student bodies and student councils and things like that, I think that's very important to focus on in your communities. But the other issue is that those don't connect to our major government, to the national level of government, the federal level of government enough. And there's a large part of the Republican Party that would like to keep it that way, and a large part of the Democratic Party that would like to see more of that integration. And we don't talk about that at all because, number one, it's horribly boring for a debate screen, right? Like CNN would never put that on a debate with Don Lemon. And the other thing is people wouldn't pay attention to that conversation. They wouldn't stand up and vote at the polls. They wouldn't take time off of work, and they wouldn't fight all of these things that they're constantly facing for voter suppression to go out and discuss these or to raise these issues, because at the end of the day, what difference does it make to them immediately? What difference is it going to make down the road? If there is no connection there, then there's no real sacrifice that can be made.
I feel like this type of civics, right? I mean, this needs to be talked about in school 101, right? And something that's interesting to me, and by the way, like I'm going to rely on a few of you that are watching in a moment here because I'm curious, because this kind of came out last time, but I still didn't look this up. I never recall seeing a campaign from the Republican Party that tries to get people to get out and vote. You always see it on the Democratic side, right? And it makes me wonder, as I adjust myself here, it makes me wonder and question why that is. Why do I only notice it from one side? Now, again, I can just be a little bit ignorant myself and just not have caught it, especially somebody who doesn't always watch TV ads, because I just don't watch a lot of TV in general. And then it's just interesting to me, like most of those campaigns are like smears against the opposite end. And I've seen them both do it for sure. Again, even though it's not equal, but I've seen them both do it. And I'm just curious. Has anybody ever seen one that's like, hey, get out and vote. Here's the Republican Party. I've seen it where they have people register, like places to register for it. I just haven't noticed like any actual like broadcasting and advertisement to the masses, if that makes any sense. And so I don't know if you're trying to look that up now.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I just put a quick search into Google if there's anything that pops up, because like you, I don't
get out and vote,
tend
right? Like
to,
when you see like the get out and vote campaigns.
Yeah, I don't tend to remember that. Now, I will say that to your point earlier, I think the other perception is that people in the generations prior to ours, it's more of a fact that they don't need to put that message out there because there's more of a responsibility that's known within that age range to get out and vote. It's responsibility. Typically, they have more freedom to do so because their jobs are a little bit more flexible with that. Mm-hmm. They don't need that vote as bad. And I think that they understand the risk of if you start motivating young people to go out and vote, that they're going to vote against you. And, the Democrats on the flip side of that, Democratic Party, they know that a lot of their support comes from the younger generations. They know that it comes from a lot of the more disconnected to politics, political discussion generations and types of people. So by saying get out to vote, I've seen some people criticize that campaign because it's basically saying it doesn't matter how educated you are, just go to the polls and put somebody's name down. That's a point that I think is fair to make.
Wait.
But let me finish. The get out to vote campaign should not just be go vote. It should be go educate yourself on what you're voting for. Go take a second to read into the fact that you have a responsibility as an American citizen to actually submit your views and submit your opinion through the ballot, and go vote. I think there is a distinction that people raise issue with, and that could be one of the reasons why it comes more from one side. Because I'll be honest, as the Democratic National Committee, I don't think they do this because they actually care too much about what the Democratic or what the younger generation thinks. I think it's because they know that they're going to vote for people like Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, just these more youthful millennial sort of
Well,
support
it's a more progressive
generators.
party, but it's a more progressive party. Of course,
Yeah.
the majority may do that, and I think that's the assumption, right? It's like, we if I were a Republican, I wouldn't complain if somebody just went and, like, you vote by your party anyway. Most people do, right? And that shouldn't be the appropriate thing to do. You should go out and say, okay, which one's the better candidate, and vote. But I've seen it time and time again where people just go, and if it's red, they're going to vote red. If it's blue, they're going to vote blue, so on and so forth. But I mean, again, that's very dominant in the red side, because even as somebody who is now a registered Democrat, because I have, at this point in my life, personally, I've given up on the Republican Party, right? They're dead to me because they have no courage. I've also, this past election was a time that I tilted the balance, because I have voted Republican twice in my life. And now I've voted Democrat 3 times. And there's not a Republican I know that I've had this debate that has actually voted Democrat ever in their life. And that's a question I've always asked, right? I'm like, okay, as a registered Republican, can you answer me honestly? Have you ever voted, Democrat? Oh, no. And I'm like, oh, no. Not one has ever come across to you better than the other. So it's interesting. And this is where, again, I'm just never convinced that both sides are equal in this equation. But I just think the reason why I haven't seen these things, and it's a push, is younger people tend. I know for me personally, I haven't. I won't see things in a conservative view. It doesn't mean that some of my views aren't conservative. I definitely do have some here and there, but I don't let that cloud my judgment. Like, I just, maybe as a youthful person that's grown up, as a millennial in this digital age, I literally have to go a case by case basis. That makes sense to me. I don't believe in blanketing.
Yeah, no, and I think if you ask the Democrats that are registered now in 20 years if they've ever voted for Republicans, I think you're probably going to hear the same response.
Possibly.
The fact that there's not a balance on the scales of Republicans and Democrats, that's not a new thing. It's shifted. It's different, right? Because Republican Party and the Democratic Party has pretty much switched in the last 50, 60 years in their ideology and their ideas and ideologies. And that will continue to happen, right? That's one of the main flaws of a two-party system, is loyalty and dependency on just the party lines is so severe in some cases. And we're seeing it now in 2019 more than I think I've ever seen it in my life, and maybe more than we've ever seen it in history. And it's going to flip
again.
Yeah, exactly.
We're prime examples of it.
The issue again, and I think, just to full circle, Nelson just had a really good comment. Republican and Democratic ideologies have become so rigid, neither is willing to give anything, no talking or negotiating. And that's not just true in Washington, D.C. That's also true on Facebook. That's also true on Twitter, on Instagram, on social media, on these sort of discussions that we're having. And the reason that we have these discussions, as we talked about in the last episode, it's important to highlight the fact that as somebody who's registered as a Democrat, or as somebody who is registered as a Democrat who used to be registered as a Republican, this does not define my vote. This does not define who I support or what I vote for. It tends to do that now because of the fact that there is such a need to eliminate some of the negative decisions that have been made, or to right some of the wrongs that have been made with that same focus for the past 3 years. And so I will continue to support that. I'll continue to say that the things that I vote for are not defined by what party I'm registered with. Again, I'll bring this up. My background personally, I was born into the Conservative Party of Canada. I was born into the most, and this is progressive conservatives. This is everything about, the old mentalities of the 80s and the 70s on. That was what I was born into. And a politician who really supported that was my grandfather. And so I had a lot of discussions and arguments with my grandfather about this, because we see things so differently. And the only thing that I could take away from that was, at the end of the day, he had some really good points, and he provided me an outlet to look at them in a way that I never thought I would. And if I ever wanted to have that conversation now, God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore, I don't know where I'm going to turn. Because right now, if I have a conversation with anybody who's got a skull with American flag on it on their Facebook profile, or you've got somebody who's just flashing that everything rainbow and everything Hillary, I'm with her, and it's so mob-like in the mentality right there that I don't think there can be an educated conversation because the nuance is so crowded with this idea that it's not about the content or the meat of the subject. It's just about the title and the face. That's the issue. That's another part of the problem that I don't know when that's going to get solved.
There's so many things unpacked here, and I think it's gotten worse. So, hold on. First off, let me point out Gina Arnold had a very good point. She said, that's why all ballots should be printed with no party affiliation. Know the candidates you're voting for, not just checking down all the R's or D's. Couldn't agree more. Actually, I think that's an easy thing to implement as well. So, good call out, Gina. And when I look what's socially happening, think about for which, like, I use myself for an example. I am so disgusted by the current Republican Party that even I will, and I'm admitting this, but like I would go to extremes to a degree to not have Trump, in party or anybody that is even in the line of sight that has supported him in there. I'd almost go with any other candidate. It would have to be so extreme for me not to, because of my distaste for them that is so strong. And I think that's what happens maybe in generations, right? Because when we were talking about like, the Republicans and Democrats kind of flipped, maybe this is what has happened. And I'd be very curious to know, like, what happened in the past, maybe to get especially older people to feel maybe a particular way. But yeah, I mean, this is something that I think is, when I look at the parties, the Democrats and Republicans, and the way they're behaving, I think is a total reflection on the people. I actually don't blame them at all. And let me explain what I mean. The fact that we just said that privately they'll say, oh yeah, Trump, this dude's an idiot, he's dangerous, whatever, but I'm never going to speak up about it. When we start to ask the why and to unpack that a bit, it's because they don't want to lose their place, they don't want their party turned on them. And if people were to say, hey, I fit all the values of Republicans, however, this here that you're doing, we're not down for that, then come next election, you either get somebody, a better candidate, or we will vote the other way. See, that will keep the balance. But that's not the way we operate. And they're going to do, it's just like the media. They're no different. We say, oh, the media is the enemy. The media is the enemy. Do they do things that are wrong? Absolutely. But you know what? They do the headlines. They do what they do because we, the addicts, keep buying into it and keep feeding into it. And so I think is honestly, like, the people have got to band together. These type of conversations, on Facebook, Twitter, wherever it may be, these sort of things have to happen here to say, you know what? Enough's enough, no matter who's in office, and go about it that way. That's going to make a change. Otherwise, it's going to be the same vicious cycle. And just to bring back one final point, anytime I talk to people and they say, oh, like, I had somebody very close to me say this. Oh, Terrence, I didn't hear you pipe up when Obama did X over here, right? When he was like, known to be the deporter in chief or whatnot. And it's like, okay, like, to a degree, in a sense, you're right. I didn't necessarily pipe up about it. And there's two main reasons for that. One, different timeline, right? When he was in office, technology was different. We weren't using these tools like we did then. So I was ignorant to it. I'm not saying that that's right, but it is what it is. And then secondly, things have gotten so bad that it's now made me an active person today forward. Hey, can't change the past. Sorry, sure. But if that's the excuse that we're throwing at one another, oh, I didn't see you do it, back then, that's a problem in and of itself. Because what it's stating is, since you didn't speak up, you may as well not speak up at all. That is what I hear from it. Or if you were doing something wrong, let's say you've been stealing all your life or you've been committing this crime, you may as well say, well, you committed the crime back then. You may as well continue to commit it because you don't see the difference of someone saying, wait a minute, I had an epiphany. This is wrong. This is not right. I need to step up and be accountable and do the right thing. When I hear that, you may as well say everything that I just spoke about, that's okay. Just continue down that linear path. And I can't agree with that.
Yeah. I think public personas too are so they're overvalued in the sense that we see all these people posting in favor on social media. And it's funny because we have these conversations and we both say, like, I know people who support Trump and they're the nicest people. They would never do anything. Like, if he came out and said the N-word, they would drop him and they would say, no, this isn't right. But then at the same time, we say, like, the majority of his base would probably not, he wouldn't lose a single voter if he shot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue. So somewhere there's a breakdown in logic where somewhere there's got to be a mob of people that we know and that we love and that we call them our friends and we say,
No, of
yes, you
course there's a
support
mob.
Trump, but there's a mob of people who, given the opportunity to disown somebody like Trump who said so much horrible things and says so many horrible things. And the example I'll give you, in the state of Alabama, there was a special election to replace Jeff Sessions, and Roy Moore was the Republican nominee from. It was Trump's guy. He put out a lot of support for him, made robocalls on his behalf. There was a little bit of a snafu with Roy Moore. He had some history of some improprieties that were brought into the public space. And in the state of Alabama, where you would say probably racism, sexism, the deep South, where people make really bad judgment decisions when it comes to politicians, the state of Alabama banded together. They did the right thing. They voted in a Democrat. Instead of Roy Moore in Alabama, they voted in Doug Jones.
By a slight margin.
But that slight margin tells me that there is a mob of people who, given enough context, given enough opportunity to do the right thing, even though they'll be very vocal in one way on Facebook, that deep down, again, motivation is the thing that drives everything. That internal motivation is what matters. If these politicians that are in Washington right now who have been supported by the Republican Party for so long, somebody like Lindsey Graham, somebody like Rob Corker,
I can't stand them.
If they came out and they said, this is unacceptable, this is not the behavior that a president should demonstrate, and not only are we going to talk about this on a 5-minute show on Fox and Friends, but we're also going to talk about it when we're doing the rest of our jobs, because this is important to understand that we believe that there's a racist in the White House. If they took that stance, would they lose a lot of public support? Absolutely. Would they be risking losing their position?
Also gain
100%.
Go ahead.
But if enough people in those positions of power disowned this president, he would have no power. He would have no power in Washington, D.C. He would have no power amongst the people who publicly or privately disown him. He would have no power against the politicians, or the lobbyists rather, who are standing behind the scenes going, okay, people are really public about this. The people who are voting and who are on Facebook and social media talking about it, they're really they'll give them a pass for anything. Now they're not going to. So it becomes this Jenga tower that finally falls. And the only way that happens, if people stand up for the right thing, and people stand up and do the right thing.
Let's be clear. Everybody can be bought. Right? There are certain limitations here. Like you got to know, like, live in your truth. That's the best way I can say it. Live in your truth. If you don't like immigrants coming over because you feel like, you're a more lighter skinned person and you feel you're being displaced, then live in your truth. Don't play it up. If you feel like, and I mean, this can go on and on. If I voted for, Barack Obama because I felt like I wanted to vote for a black president, live in your truth. But people are they mask everything. Right? They can't be honest with themselves. And so, like, something I say time and time again, I can 100% without shadow of doubt completely understand why somebody originally voted for Trump. I can. Because I can see why people are tired of, like, hey, the status quo, we're going to get somebody new in there. I have to admit, I can see why. It's the continuum. It's the support afterwards of all these things that go down that you justify it. And that's at some point you have to say, like, again, when's enough? And if it hasn't been enough already, in my view, this guy, he said it best. I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose supporters. He knew damn well that he could do what he was going to do and that people were still going to support him anyway, whether it's because they're hardcore Republican or, whatever it may be, right? And to Nelson's point here, he said, I can't believe Roy Moore is running again. Jimmy, you're so right. Do the right thing. And, and look, I couldn't agree more with that. But he is running again because he knows it was that slight margin that he lost by. People are quick to forgive and forget, or in particular, forget, and continue moving. Look what happened with that dude Acosta. I forget his first name. The guy that, let the dude off that was clearly molesting and raping these young girls. Right, and was a part of Trump's administration for so long. It's like, do you not vet these people? Do you not care? But the moment you bring it up, you hear a lot of opposition and excuses, right? And it's like, no, look, at some point, you got to say, wait a minute. Yeah, you're right. Why is this guy in office? Why? If he let this go, this gives no faith that he's going to be able to execute and do the right thing from there on out. And it boils down to, that point that we made earlier. The lack of critical thinking in this nation is off the charts. It's off the charts.
Have you had some of those friends that you're talking about? I have a lot of friends that are Trump supporters, people that I consider to be good people. I don't know about you, and this is a question for also the people out there listening. Have you guys had those friends be very vocal about this last batch of Trump tweets regarding these four
No,
congressmen?
they'll stay silent about it. They don't
I
talk
have
about it.
heard absolutely zero. There's no defending it. If Kellyanne Conway is your best chance to defend it, and her commentary is maybe you should all go back to where you came from, talking to a pool of reporters. I mean, I don't know what that says about anything really. Yeah, her husband didn't really say the same thing, but it's a strange time to be watching people ignore the right thing. To Nelson's point, to not necessarily do the wrong thing. Right? Because you could probably draw that line. You could say that they're not necessarily, because they're not demonizing or condemning these acts, that it's not the wrong thing. I would disagree. But anytime there's an opportunity to throw a whataboutism or say, well, what about when the other person did this? Or, what about Obama and Hillary? That's when they get vocal. That, to me, that should be a very clear indication of the fact that there isn't a defense here. You're not making any points here. All you're doing is you're excusing somebody of behavior that is inexcusable. So rather than continue to force yourself to do that, own it and say, look, this guy was a mistake. None of us will say we told you so. I promise. I'll be very clear. I'll say, look, we all make mistakes. We're all learning. We move on. But I don't think that's going to happen because there's just too much invested into it right now publicly, that it's going to take a mass exodus of supporters from a very political and high level sector to say, this isn't something we can tolerate anymore.
Which, Jeremy, by the way,
how long it's going to take?
I know you and I, we sometimes talk about books we read. Look, there's a really good book, and it's called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life by Richard, Hofstadter. Anyhow, winner of the 1964. Yeah. So the 1964, right? Like when you think about how old this book is, and it really is telling of the time that we're at now. Like just really amazing. And like I'll maybe like hold it up here for this is what the book cover looks like. I would definitely take a look at it. Between that one and the one that I just started reading on the plane called The Vanishing American Adult, which unfortunately kind of takes a bit of a stab at our generation, Jeremy, but rightfully so. It just shows you like we're heading down a path where we can course correct for sure, but there's going to be pain that's going to be felt by just the way that we have been just moving forward as society, what we have been allowing, what we have been simply accepting as a status quo and saying that it's acceptable. And when you look at from the lack of responsibility, and accountability, just like, this president, prime example, this dude, when has he ever admitted that he's made a wrong choice other than Jeff Sessions, right? Like everything is literally someone else's fault. It's shifting, it's projecting. It's something that our generation is typically thrown for. They say, oh, you guys don't want to work hard. You guys are always blaming something else, right? And I'm like, and yet, everything that you say that's bad about millennials, our generation, is literally the embodiment of this current president. And like, I just don't understand it.
Do you think he would feel bad about Jeff Sessions if that whole Mueller report came back that he was doing anything wrong? The reason he feels bad about it now is because he's like, oh, I freaked out over nothing because for some reason they didn't find anything. He knew there was something he should be scared of. For whatever reason, he got away with it. We may never know.
The jury's out on that. I mean, look, just to put a few things clear here, look, Mueller's going to be testifying here very shortly, which I'm thankful.
If we live cast it?
Yes, I'm thankful for because people need to hear it. Because the one thing I'm tired of a lot of these supporters saying, because I hear it, turns. Like, again, somebody very close to me said, well, see, no, he had no more, he went up there and he didn't suggest that, any more arrests, And I'm like, look, you got to listen to the rules of which that they're being played by, which is, they were running under the assumption that any sitting president can't be indicted. So, of course, there weren't any more indictments. But then Mueller very clearly said if they felt that they could exonerate him of anything, they would have said so. didn't happen. And so it's interesting to me, like these games are being played, and then again, what we're accepting as a people to say, okay, well, I guess there's nothing that they found. Well, look, it's not a witch hunt when what 36, 37 people were arrested. There's not a witch hunt, my dude. No, there's a reason that went down. And to me, I just don't buy, right? And say what you will, but I cannot. I just don't accept when you're the top. You're the top. You're the chief, and everyone around you is going to jail, going to prison, and yeah, you're involved. I'm sorry, you're involved. Point
Yeah.
blank. It's like, and this is a touchy subject, totally different, right? You can tell me all day long, right? Hey, look, I know OJ's glove and whatnot didn't fit and whatnot, but I don't know, dude. You can still have someone else that done it for you. Still think the dude did it. Wholly different topic, different situation. But I'm like, look, just because he may have not have wanted to pull the trigger, put his finger on the button or whatnot, does not mean he didn't have any involvement. And I know I call him an idiot, but the one thing that he gets right is he has people do his work for him. That's that's just what that type of class of people do. You get
Well,
lawyers, you get people to do the work, find the loopholes. You solve the issue. You're my dude. Bury it.
he
That's
has
the type
already
of guy he is.
exposed. He's already exposed so many inefficiencies in our, you know, checks and balances system as a government. He's already exposed so many areas where it was designed for a very specific purpose, and since the creation of this nation, since that was put into place, we haven't had somebody test that in a way that has forced us to look at it and go, "Holy crap, we've missed a few points here." He has done that in a major, major way.
Yeah, but
So it's not crazy for me to think that even though they didn't find something necessarily with that report or with anything that really he talks about, like let's not even isolate it just to the Mueller report. There's a lot that he does and says on a regular basis that probably shouldn't be legal for a sitting president to do. And so the fact that he gets away with it because there's no law against it doesn't say a whole lot about his inability to, or his ability to evade the law, as much as it says like we really haven't needed the law to be this clear before, but we really screwed up with this one. So now we're looking at this and going, okay, we made mistakes along the way, and there's some clearing, some clear inefficiencies that need to be addressed and to be corrected, so that going forward, presidents don't feel like they have the same level of protection.
yeah, well, there's so many things, Nelson, that he's in the process of destroying that's not even funny. But like, I'll
Yeah,
bring up the history. Look at Nixon, right? Nixon. Let's get it clear here. Before those tapes came out, he was held in high regard. People had his poll numbers were high. They were. Tapes came out and everything took a turn, right? And so history tends to repeat itself, and I think we're in the same situation here. We can deny or whatnot, but when Mueller has to get on the stage and answer these questions, again, critically thinking, listening through, and he's going to have to be more specific, which he tried to, and I can see where people disagree with Mueller, but I still think he did a good job. I'm still looking at Congress and the rest of them to say, honestly, the fault's kind of on you. Like, you got to
yeah,
do your job, right? Like, he gave you the keys. He literally has given you the instructions of how you proceed because his hands were bound. And I think he followed it to the T. Again, like what Mueller did or not, I
yeah.
think he did a fine job with that. But yet, there's still nobody's acted. Nobody's taken it anywhere. And you can't take inaction also as a sign that everything's kosher. Because look, something that prosecutors do and whatnot is look, they build up a case and they make sure they dot their I's and they cross their T's before they go in for that execution. And as I said, if you're gonna aim for the king, the king's head, I'm chopping this up. You best damn nail it and kill him, right? You better get it that one shot because if you miss, it's game over. And with things like double jeopardy, with things like if we don't proceed with everything that's gone down here, if he gets elected in 2020, which there's a good chance he will, you can't with the statute of limitations. You can't go at him then either.
Yeah.
So there's a gap closing in, and no wonder this dude's rallying. He should be rallying if he wants his freedom. Again, me being under the impression that he's done a lot of illegal activity, but it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes. And look, Democrats in general, this is going to be ice skating uphill because it is very hard to get a president out of office when the economy is this good, which, by the way, he deserves some credit for, but it didn't reach this record number on his own. Remember, there was somebody in office with 8 years prior that helped those numbers go up, so don't forget that. But it's very hard to get rid of a president who, again, sits in a very good economy currently.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I won't give him any credit for the economy. There's too much out there that says that would have
He
happened
gets a little
regardless.
unfortunate.
And you know what? It's funny because that's his entire life, right? If he would have taken the money that his father gave him and not done anything with it, he'd be more rich than he is now. So it's probably the economy's in the same boat. Maybe the economy could be better with a different president. Who knows? Uh, and this always seems to happen, Terrace. We get on here, we say we're going to do an hour talking about a specific topic.
No.
We talk Faceapp for a little bit, then we talk a little bit about Trump, and then it just goes all downhill from there because it's such a polarizing topic that people want to make discussion around. They want to talk about the fact that this is unprecedented. What a time to be alive if you appreciate just how history works and how history does repeat itself, but also when you see one of these new examples of this sort of type of history that's happening right in front of your eyes, and as it's going on, you're just sitting here along for the ride, like what's going to happen next. This is what we're living in right now, and people want to talk about it. They want to share about it.
Yeah,
At the end of the day,
how do you think? Just real quick here, right? Just a slight little shift. How do you think history is going to treat this era, right? Like when they look back on it, when like your, 5 times grandchildren look at this, assuming that we haven't destroyed ourselves, which is also
yeah.
Yes. But how do you think history is going to look upon these moments?
Very wet if global warming continues, but mostly just a matter of the discussion around what did we do to fix it? Did we fix it? If we didn't fix it, I hate to tell you, there is no grandkids, right? Like I firmly believe that we're in a position where this is a fork in the road, and there have been moments like this in our society, in our history. Let's look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs. There were parts where a decision had to be made by a leader, a decision had to be made by the voters, and they made the right decision. And because of that, we continued on. We went down the path that we went down, and we were able to grow as a society. That's where we are. We're getting to that point. I think the 2020 election is probably the closest thing to it that we could probably find, because there isn't any grounds to do anything right now. But in 2020, we have this great opportunity to put in somebody who's going to challenge not just the president, but also the political climate, to challenge the society, the views that society has on politics, the views that society has on each other, the divide that goes down the party lines, but also the social lines, black versus white, foreign versus domestic, all of these things that are just created now to be an issue. 2020, I think, is the first time where we as a society, as a voting populace, have had a chance to say, we screwed up in 2016. We're going to go the other direction with it. But at the same time, while we're justifying and we're rectifying those decisions that we're making now, we're going to address some of the things that were ignored. We're going to address some of the points that have really caused this chain to get this chain of collapse to be so massive. We're going to take on the top 1% of earners in this country who are making the decisions, and we're going to take on things like gerrymandering. We're going to take on lobbyists. We're going to take on, all of the things that Trump stood for publicly as a politician, as somebody who said, let me challenge the status quo. 2020, we have a chance to actually find somebody. And I'm not saying this is going to be anybody that's out there right now. Hopefully with our system that we have found somebody, right, that's good enough. But this is a chance for us to make that decision, to do the right thing for your grandkids, for my grandkids, for their grandkids. Because, man, I've never seen it so tumultuous where we're just towing that line between collapse and just moving forward as a democratic republic that we were set up for.
Which, by the way, Tiffany, I don't know if you hopped in a little late, but we were talking about like global warming, all sorts of things coming through, and how history would treat this era. For me, I think just to be just as upfront as possible, I think we're in some big trouble, to be honest with you. I don't know how we're going to come out of this, because look, we've been so lucky for so long, right? There's been no major health epidemics. There's been no major like earth crisis where like a major hurricane or earthquake or something really killed. I mean, there's been some things that happened, but nothing that's been like truly earth-shattering devastation-wise. And I think we're kind of long overdue, and we're in a situation now where people are so not only divided, to your point, Tiffany, but more so self-centered. In other words, if it doesn't have to do anything with me, then why should I care? And and again, Tiffany. So the projection. No, I don't blame social media. Who is social media? Social media is you. Social media is me. Is Jeremy. Is everybody's here. It's people, right? And so we have to be careful because when we say media, I think we really have to start substituting it for it's ourselves. It's just a reflection of ourselves. And so this divide is not because of social media. No, it's because of ourselves. It's us not willing to listen, to learn, to be empathetic, to try to see in someone else's shoes why they may feel differently. That's the issue. All social media did was add to all the gasoline. It was just a small little spark to the flame that caused the whole thing to explode. But all the ingredients were still there. It's still
Yeah, and social media gave people like you and I
a
an
voice.
outlet to say this is how I feel, I'm right, and then to also be told by half of the population, yes, you are right, and ignore the half
Or
that
wrong.
say no, you're wrong, right? So it gave us the power to vilify vindicate our opinions and to say that yes, this is everything that you're saying is correct. You can choose to. It's fake news if they say you're wrong. Like it's not a real thing. You can just ignore that side because they don't matter. The only people that matter are the people that agree with your opinion. And Tiffany, to your point, that is what created this divide. And using things like, and I'll counterpoint Tiffany that I'd love to hear your thoughts on using things like racial divide, immigration, these discussions that are so easily you can pick one side or another, gun control, abortion, right versus left on all of these major topics.
Mm-hmm.
It has been probably the worst part of the worst example of social media is the fact that you can't really have a nuanced conversation where there's understanding on both sides. And I don't think this was by accident. I think it's very intentional for these discussions to come up in the way that they do. And the point of media, 24-hour news networks were probably another perpetrator of this because the first major 24-hour news network, CNN, Fox News, that whole discussion of, Fox News has a very specific audience, CNN has a very specific audience, MSNBC has a very specific audience. So creating a platform for this entire army of social media driven folks to go out and say, I'm going to fuel my opinions and my discussions with things that I agree with and only the things that I agree with. It just, like you said, Terrence, it added fuel to the fire. It added these ingredients for this explosion. And so what has to happen for that side is people have to admit, I'm not right about everything.
Yeah, well,
And
there's
that's
there's an
simple.
issue here, and this is where I'll give like a counterpoint to myself, right? To kind of go along with this could be what Tiffany is trying to say as well. Look, we have the one thing I'll give, and this is not just social media. I'll even say technology, right? Is the human usage, like the weaponization of cognitive dissonance. And so, meaning people are seeking out, okay, who agrees with me? These are the things I want to hear. And look what we do in technology. We build algorithms to show you more things that you like. Right? Oh, you like this. I'm going to show you more of this. And so now it starts taking away opposing views or counterpoints. And so all you're seeing is things that you think you want to hear, which, to quote our president, everyone knows, right? No, that's not the case. In your little bubble, that may be, but that's not the world. And so this is a perpetual trap that we put ourselves in. That is, this technology is supposed to give everybody a voice and kind of free us. Unfortunately, it can be used against us as well. Which again, back to our first point, why certain data mining, right, to me is also equally important. Why we should be cognizant about where that data goes and who's doing what and manipulating us. So, we have to be very careful with that. That's marketing 101 manipulation. Just knowing some of those human tendencies, we've now fallen into that trap. And now with the use of, weaponizing technology as well, this is where, again, I just remain a little bit on the cautious side, and I just feel like we're really in a bad place. And then Larry Vance says, should they redefine news? Yeah, I think we should. I think it's already been redefined. The fact that news agencies out there at one point said, hey, cameraman, you're fired. We're going to send out the normal reporters with a cell phone because they're so good enough and you can do it. Or the fact that the news literally uses Twitter and says, here it is, whether it's the president or anyone, this is what people are saying. Like, if that's our measure, we're in somewhat trouble as is.
Yeah, Larry, that's a great point because I think the news has never really meant what people think the news means. I hear this all the time that the media has a responsibility to be unbiased and down the middle. I've never known that to be true.
Not
I've
possible,
never known
but it's not
anything.
possible.
Yeah, I've never known anything to be possible where any one person can see something and say, I have no opinion about this, and that will not motivate my talking points or
Human
my discussion
beings
on this.
equals biased.
Exactly. So
Case
there's no
closed.
if motivation drives every bit of conversation, then if you see something and you disagree with it, then you're going to have a bias to it. And even if you try and make it seem like you don't have a bias to it, it's still going to come across that way. Look at CNN. CNN, for the most part, I know there's some on there who are pretty much just throw caution to the wind. They don't even pretend to be biased anymore. Um, there are some people on CNN who do a very good job of saying, "Look, this is not my opinion. This is not my take, this is the fact." And they put out facts in a way that tells a story that's very specific to what their viewers want to hear. So whether they're biased or not doesn't matter because they're still controlling the conversation that they're putting out there. They're still talking about the things that they want to talk about and not the things that maybe would be newsworthy, to Larry's point. So if we redefine news, I don't know what you would define it to. I don't know that news has ever existed the way that people think news should exist. There will never be a group of unbiased people. But I also don't think that the answer to the solution or the answer to the problem is to have both sides represented on a 24-hour/7 spectrum where everything is talked about, but only on that one lens for both sides. Because then, like you said, like we said earlier, you just arm the masses with these opinions that aren't necessarily based out of
Well, let's
fact.
unpack that a little bit, right? Because news, and like I hear what you're saying, Tiffany. Like news isn't facts, but at the same time, there are facts that are lying in there, and you, as an educated human being, has to be able to decipher the differences, and then the responsibility of the news organization is to clarify what is what. Meaning, let me tell you where news can be a fact. Here's a fact. Your president said this, or let's say, global warming, right? You can put on news that global warming, X amount of carbons happened, this year, and we're looking at trending that 2031, Florida could be, and I'm just throwing out, a random number here. So, but let's say, Florida could be underwater, whatever, right? That in and of itself can be a fact. Some people play with the headlines, which is a big problem with the news. And of course, people tell you their thoughts on that. But to me, it's very clear. When I read the news, it's typically very clear of what's factual versus not. When an event has happened, something was said that was quoted, right? Even though you can say, well, Terrence has an opinion. No, the fact is that opinion was stated. That is a fact. Or again, this event has happened. That is a fact. Now, how people unpack it or tell you how it can affect you, well, of course, that's all opinionated. The fact is, I got a speeding ticket today. The opinion is, I can pay a fine. The opinion is the judge can put points on my license. I could show up and that may not happen, right? So these things can be dicey, but I think we have a unrealistic viewpoint on what news is to begin with, and that's an issue. And so Tiffany follows up. Let me post it up here.
Yeah.
Actual news can be facts, headlines, or clickbait for the most of the time. Tiffany, I couldn't agree more. I think you're absolutely right on that one. Meaning, and I think that's the issue that many of us take with media is that these titles, they're meant to be clickbaits because that's how they get paid, right? And again, I'm going to turn it on to the people. I'm going to say it's our fault. Why is it our fault? Because we don't want to pay for news. Prime example, New York Times tries to get me to pay, the monthly subscription. And we know, like, and again, I'm going to assume there's some base level knowledge here, but newspapers don't sell like they used to anymore, right? Everything's so quick. As a matter of fact, people will turn around and say, oh, I go to this site because the news comes out first. And you can see the respectable news will say, breaking news, this happens, we'll follow up with more details. Other irresponsible will put in the breaking news and then start to say, put out all these things where they feel it's going to go. And the sad part is, if that's what we continue to click, if that's what we continue to read, and that's what continues to pay the bills and keep the lights on, that's exactly what they're going to do. So, it's a double-edged sword. I'm not saying that what these news agencies are doing is right, but I just want to be quick to say, we can't keep projecting it on these organizations that are trying to bring us the news, because the sad part is you can have someone that's really trying to do the right thing, but unfortunately that's not where you and I will choose to go. That's not where our eyeballs goes. And in a day and age where people don't want to pay for services, hence free Facebook, free Google. People complain about Apple costs too much, but then hey, a lot of their stuff is comes with the cost of the actual equipment, and they give you better privacy value. It goes on and on. But hey, the data shows is where we go, and it's just the world in which we've shaped.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to temper this discussion on media just because there's so much you could talk about.
Oh
The
yeah.
last point I'll make, though, for sure, is when we hold the media to the standard, right? Like we see something horrible that happens, whether it's a mass shooting, an accident, a tragedy of some kind. There's a responsibility from the media to treat it very carefully, to be very intentional about what they say, to be very deliberate, because there's real life consequences. In Canada, there was a major news story back in 2007 or 2008. Murder is not something that happens very often in Canada anymore. It's more and more. But there was a Greyhound bus incident where a gentleman got on a Greyhound bus. He sat next to a guy for 6 hours of the ride, and then 6 hours in, he took out a knife and just started stabbing him. Just murdered him, bloody murder right there. It was awful. It was huge news in Canada. And unfortunately, the way that the family found out about this incident was because they had reporters at their door, and they were saying, "Hey, how do you feel about your son being decapitated on a Greyhound bus by a passenger?" And they were like, "What? we didn't even know he was on the Greyhound bus." There's a responsibility for media. There's so many of these stories that have happened that have created this very specific set of principles that when things are involved, where there's actually stakeholders, where there's people who are at risk of information or at security from security standpoints, the media tends to do a pretty good job of taking care of those things, being very specific and being very diligent in that. When we see these horrible events like mass shootings, I see a transition from the 24-hour Trump coverage to a very specific, same across the board, discussion. Now there are points of that where was he brown, was he a terrorist, was whatever, where but that comes into play for a moment and then kind of goes out of focus for more of talk about the victims,
Mm-hmm.
who they were, talking about the security, of course gun control comes into it for these shootings, but at the same time, usually there's a good amount of time that passes between, understanding that there's a real tragedy here and understanding that there's victims involved with real before they make it political. And of course, you could say this has gotten worse and worse, but of course it has. It's been more the topic 24/7. That's the kind of news that I think people want to see 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That just won't happen. If there's no consequences, if there's no actual responsibility to make sure that people don't get hurt or that feelings, that feelings are the only thing that matters. Of course, they're going to report on what gets them the clickbait. Of course, they're going to report on the things that gets them the most views on television and on the internet. That's the business side of it. There's nothing else that they can do about it. You could really boil that down into a really, a very difficult thought process. But when these events happen, what's the first thing you do is you go to social media and you go to the news and you go to CNN and you go to Fox News and you see what happened at this school, what happened at this bar, what happened in this city. And so they get those views regardless. They don't have to worry about how much traffic is coming in. Now they have to focus on that responsibility. It's never going to be equal. There's going to be a point where media is responsible to themselves and they're responsible to the people, and it's never going to be both. It's never going to be the same. So take that for what you will. If you see something on the news that you disagree with, go challenge it. Go read an article that challenges it for you. Go find out some information. Take some context from where that source is coming from. Don't watch news stations that constantly offer nothing but opinions, right? Don't spend your time on Fox and Friends when they're not actually reporting on anything that's totally happening, that's actually newsworthy. They're just talking about how they feel about things that are happening that are newsworthy, right? And I'm not saying CNN's off the hook or MSNBC's off the hook. The same thing. Don't watch Rachel Maddow as she's saying, this is my opinion of what's going on. Watch the people who want to tell you how it's happening, what's happening with it, who are interviewing the stakeholders, who are interviewing the people who are involved. That's the media that you should be focusing on. And that's the media that you should be taking your, Ralph Waldo Emerson. If you don't watch any sort of media, you're uninformed. If you do, you're misinformed. Take that, own it, live with it, and be okay with it.
I guess like and to give a little counterpoint, I think you have to look at certain personalities, certain people that you can trust, right? Like I could trust, let's say, like my dad, right? Or I call my Uncle Jim, one of my aunt's husband, and so there are certain people that I can look at and say, okay, like I do trust them, I do trust your opinion, and everybody has somebody in their life that they do trust their opinions, and I think you have to really investigate who that type of person is, right? Like personally, like let's say if Rachel Maddow, I actually happen to really like her. I think she does great reporting. You have to take with a grain of salt, do your due diligence, and understand when you're. And again, like people's BS detector can be very on point. People know it. If I listen and I hear a lot of conflicting information, or if they tell me something, I don't just say, okay, cool. Let me just go regurgitate exactly everything you said. I say, wait a minute. Okay, this person I do trust. Let me look more into it and try to have an understanding, right? Just like what we're doing now. Like a lot of these things, like obviously we heard about it. It's had to come from some sort of news cycle or something to spark this conversation. But then we take it and we dissect it. We try to understand it and see where these trends, where it's going, why we're making decisions that we make. And so I think it certainly has a place. I just think you can't just listen to a news source and call it a day, like to your point, right? Like you really, if you're going to listen to it, you have to unpack that. I just don't think there's any way about it. And in a society where everything's so quick, everything's so fast, so many notifications come through the phone, I think you do have to stop, pause, reflect, and say, okay, what's important? Am I listening to it? If I want to have some sort of thought or opinion about it, I have to pay more attention to it. I have to look into it, and I can't just receive this information and just be okay with that. I know that may sound like well, wait a minute, Terrence. What else am I supposed to do with it? No, I think as human beings, it's our due diligence to understand and to limit the amount of information that's coming in. Like for me, I don't have any. I only have one news app on my phone. I've gotten rid of everything else, and it's a very specific from different sources that have coming through with very limited notifications because I only have so much bandwidth through one given day to process it. And I don't want anything coming through and hijacking my mind where I see a catchy headline or something, and that's where I conjure up a memory like, oh yeah, I heard about that and I heard it was terrible. Where all I got was a headline, I had no context in how I read it, then I would have been like, wait a minute, it's completely different. So with that, I just try to say we have to dive a little bit deeper with it. I'm posting exactly what you just said, Jeremy, by the way. But with that, Jeremy, I'll give you the final word. Guys, I know we're not approaching, we're over like the 2 hour mark.
I don't know how we
So,
could ever stop if we get started sometimes, Terrence. But the one thing I will say, thank you for posting all those beautiful pictures of the family out there in Arizona. I appreciate the massive cover up that was you going out to check out Area 51 in advance of our massive raid on September 20th. But no, I appreciate that anytime we get to check in on the family. But last point I'll make, honestly, guys, these discussions are important. This conversation is important. It's not Trump bashing. It's not political fighting. I would love to have somebody who disagreed with a lot of these points that we're making sitting on the other side of the webcam, just so that I could really learn something. That's the thing that I think I value most about these discussions, is when you do have somebody who comes at it from a different perspective, you learn so much. So anybody out there who wants to come on and disagree with Terrence and I, because it seems like we just agree on way too much, buddy, by all means. And Terrence, you better post that picture that I sent you, by the way, for the photo app, because I did took a lot of fancy editing on that one.
okay, that one I'll put up. That one will be the main one from it. All right,
There you
so
go.
with that, appreciate you all. I think we're going to try to have like a like a standard time on this. Not to say a lot, man. I think like 2 hours max for sure. We try to keep it at an hour, but when people are participating and
Yeah.
coming in, like you can't let a good conversation die that way. Robert, my battery said no more. Have a good one, guys. Fair enough, it's
You
tapped
and
out.
me both, Robert.
But yes, with that, everyone, have a good night. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the next time. I think 10 o'clock, like Eastern time, seems to be maybe a good time. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
good with me.
Yeah, and hey, there's always the actual podcast place where it goes. But all right, brother, take care. I'll talk to you all later.